Peaky Kid in it here, and yeah, you may notice I'm actually wearing a different shirt because I finally took it back because, yeah, I'll talk about it later. But I'm going to talk about two more things. Move on. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is Transgender Update 13. I believe it's 13. As the title implies, it's not looking good. So essentially the reason that it's not looking good is because they've essentially told me that they can't really verify if I actually have like gender dysphoria, and they went through a bunch of things like saying, for example, like when people call me he or refer to me as male pronouns. I still don't like when people call me by male pronouns, like when Richard, every single time he refers to me as his brother or he, and I'm just like, yeah, so from now on I'm actually going to try and I'm going to ask people to refer to me as she and her by female pronouns. So essentially they can't verify if I actually have gender dysphoria or not, or if I could benefit from some medical care, or if I'm just transgender but I don't actually want to like have medical stuff. Although it's been quite confusing for them because, as a lot of you know, I have a strong lack of motivation. So when it comes to doing something, I think, should I do that? And then I end up not doing it. So at the moment, I really need like, I need about at least 4 months maybe, and maybe I have to push it back every now and then. But I'm gonna try to see if I'm more feminine, like act more feminine than I already try to act. I mean, to be feminine, you don't need makeup and you don't need specific clothing, but the fact is that I've allowed people for so long to refer to me as male pronouns because I, quote unquote, wasn't technically transitioning, which isn't true at all. That's what's confused them. They've decided, that seems a bit weird. This may all end in a big explosion like the fucking Hindenburg. Yeah, that'll be a total of fucking, Jesus Christ, how long? 2016? 6 years down the drain? So, okay, move on. And now the next one is a bit of an interesting one, and it's that I'm switching to AVI rendering. Now, you may not understand what this means. A lot of you who are watching this may completely, you may not even understand what an AVI file is. I'm not calling everyone an idiot. I'm not calling anyone an idiot, actually. I'm just saying, some people may not understand. So for the longest time, I rendered in MP4 because it was good enough. Turns out, however, it is not good enough because the way MP4 works, at least on VideoPad, I'm not sure if it's the same on every other editing software, but the way MP4 works in VideoPad specifically is that it'll essentially round up or round down the frame rate. So for example, this camcorder records in 50 FPS and the gameplays are usually in 60 FPS. Now, with the way I was recording before, my face cam would be in 25 FPS and the games would sometimes be in 30 FPS. So essentially, what VideoPad would do is it would find the average between them in MP4 at least. So in other words, instead of rendering, even though I clicked to render the video in 60 FPS at the highest quality, it for some reason said this is 60 FPS, but this is not 60 FPS, this is 50 FPS. Alright then, we'll render the video in 45 FPS. Yeah, because that fucking makes sense. However, what I've discovered is that MP4 is a lossy format, which means when you render, you get some loss. Okay, so I'm going to just show a few images as an example. For example, when I rendered my AI dungeon video, I believe it was like, I don't remember. I can actually quickly check it now. Okay, so even though the gameplay, I think the gameplay was 60 FPS. I mean, this is one example of AI dungeon, but it was fine. Like, okay, so the average frame rate shows as 50.24 frames per second, which is about 50, let's just say 50 frames per second. That's how it got rendered. However, when I uploaded the video to YouTube, I noticed something very strange. And that was the fact that even though it was rendered at 50 FPS, it was still choppy. And as I was checking the actual video, it's not choppy. So then I re-downloaded the version that got re-encoded, yes, re-encoded, and I found this, 30, not 50.2, 30, even though the frame rate was closer to 60, so essentially every single time I've said, oh look, this video is now in 60 FPS. No, because YouTube fucking re-encodes it to 30 FPS. Now that happens when I encode it in MP4, Okay, so at one point I made a test video. It was actually something that I recorded, which was just, it was me recording the bath because there was like the hot tap was kind of wonky, and even though it was on full blast, it was coming out like it was barely on. And I took 6 seconds out of it. It's the exact same video. Now, this is what the data looks like in MP4, and this is what the data looks like in AVI. Yeah, so even though the video itself is in 50 FPS, so yeah, it averaged out at 50 FPS for MP4. AVI, it didn't fuck with the audio at all. It's like, it didn't screw with the audio. Like the bitrate on the MP4 one, the audio bitrate is lower, but in AVI, everything is perfect. It doesn't try to find the average frame rate of the video. It doesn't try to do any weird re-encoding. Now you might be thinking, but what about YouTube? Now, on something like Why I Became a Programmer, that's still standard definition because that was still rendered in 720p at 30 FPS. And then you look at something like my most recent retrospective, which has high definition, but it's high definition at 30 FPS, even though the video is not at 30 FPS, it's like 50. Now, I uploaded this video as a test in the AVI format, and I saw this, and I immediately realized, yeah, so if I uploaded this at the MP4 with 50 FPS, it would have rounded down to 30 FPS. What I'm essentially saying is that if you render your video at anything other than 60 FPS, if you render it at like 55 FPS, 56 FPS, 53 FPS, 50 FPS, it'll say, no, that's not 60 FPS. We're going to re-render it at 30 FPS. But yeah, you might be noticing this. It says 1080p 60 or 720p 60. That's the frame rate at the end. So yeah, what I'm trying to say is that I'm no longer going to render in MP4. I am now going to render in AVI. Sure, the files will be much larger, and sure, it'll take a lot longer to upload them, but I would rather have smooth videos than have a fucking 50 FPS video rendered down into a 30 FPS video. So I say, oh look, it's in 60 frames per second, the video. But AVI doesn't fucking care. AVI will essentially force the video to stay in 60 FPS. Even if none of the footage in the video is in 60 FPS, it will force it, it'll force it. So yeah, you may notice that this video is actually a whole lot fucking smoother, and it genuinely is a whole lot smoother, and not in fucking 30 FPS, even though the video was rendered in 60 FPS. So anyway, I've been your host, PKK98, it's been PKK98 Chat, and you've all been fantastic. So until the next video, I say, bye bye.